We'll start in 30 seconds, guys. If you're noticing for the assignment today, all you have to do is take notes, okay, and take a photo of your notes. Very easy stuff, so pay attention. Make sure you're copying the notes down, and you should be fine. That's all you have to do today. So just getting started with World War II, which is one of our craziest units by far. Okay, so again, you just got to take really good notes today, so let's get started, all right? So the focus question is, what were the major differences in the countries that fought for both sides in World War II? Okay, so take a second and write down the focus question. All right, and then I want you to make a T-chart. Okay, a T-chart is going to be, you have a do now, so do this in your notebook. Okay, when you take a photo of your notes and you post it, I expect to see this. What Allied and Central Powers from World War I do you remember from earlier this year? Okay, so there were 4 Allied power countries and 3 Central Power countries. Okay, so what countries do you kind of remember? No, you don't write it in the chat. Write it in your notebook. Okay, I will check it when you post the video of your notes or your Google Doc a little bit later. I'm going to give you about a full minute, minute and a half to do it. All right, and then we will discuss shortly. Okay, 30 more seconds. Okay. So if you want in the chat right now, please let me know any Allied power countries that you remember. Who were some of the Allied power countries that you remember? USA was one, absolutely. We were an Allied power. France was another, excellent. The UK, excellent. And there's one more big one. Russia, very good, guys. Okay, so now, we have the United States, France, United Kingdom, and Russia. And of course, there were many more countries, but those are the 4 major ones. Who remembers the 3 central powers? Write in the chat who the 3 central powers were. Germany was one. That was the big one. Good. Germany, Bulgaria, yes. Bulgaria was another. There was 2 other ones, though. One started with an A, one started with an O. Austria-Hungary, very good. One more. Ottoman Empire. Okay, so we are going, the reason why we did that is just kind of get our sense of some of the countries. So it looked like this, I think. Okay, we're going to look at the World War II sides a little bit later on in this class. Okay, but you'll see that a lot of the Allied powers are the same. Okay, you got France, you got the United States, you got Britain. And you see the new term is the term Axis power, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But here's the notes I want you to copy down. I need all 4 terms copied down, please. Because the reason why this war starts and begins, World War II, which is the deadliest war in world history, has a lot to do with the political systems that were running each country. Okay? So take your time. I'll give you 2 full minutes to copy it down before I even start talking over it. This way you have a good understanding of what's going on.
You said copy down in red?
Everything. Blue, black, green, red. Everything.
Okay.
No, Daniele, not in the T-chart. You just copy it down in your next set of part of the notes. Yes, Edgar.
No, that was my mistake. My bad.
No worries. Okay, so now that you have time to kind of copy this down, let's kind of go over, everything here. So there are different types of governments around the world. Not every single government around the world has the United States form of government. So let's first start with our form of government so we're on the same page and understand it. The United States form of government is known as a republic, or it's a form of democracy, and you guys are kind of familiar with this already. It's a system of government that is led by the people of a country. So I often ask the question, who is in charge of the country? Who runs the country? And often kids will make the mistake and say the president. That's not true. The president just runs the executive branch. The president actually works for us. The answer to my question is the people actually run the country. Okay? And the way we run the country and the way we use our voice is basically We have the right to vote. Okay, so people go around and they vote for their leaders to speak on our behalf. That is a form of republic. Now, in our country, you're going to notice a lot of things. We have a lot of freedoms and rights. Okay, so we have the freedom to choose what job we want. We have the freedom to do what we want. And we have rights as well. You guys know our right to free speech. Okay, you have the right to free religion. You have all of your amendment rights. Okay, so basically a republic or democracy is centered around usually freedom and individual rights. Okay, everyone has these. What you're going to notice is there are other countries coming about at this time that are unhappy with the republic and democratic forms of government, so they adapt new governments. Okay, one of the biggest new forms of government is centered around the word fascism. But before we go into fascism, we want to know what a dictatorship is, okay? Just because I think the word is important before we go into fascism. All right, so dictatorship, it's the government run by a single person who has absolute authority over their country. Okay, so what that means is a country's going to elect a leader, like a president, but they're going to be a lot more powerful than the president. This single leader is going to make every single major decision. Alex, like who? Like you know who? Does his last name start with H? Okay, yeah. So we're going to start getting into people like that soon. So basically, if a country that was usually a democracy or a republic was struggling, which certain countries were, a dictator can sometimes be elected and a new form of government gets put in place. So you can have a dictatorship with lots of different governments. You can have a dictatorship with a fascist government. You can have a dictatorship with a communist government. You can have a kind of like a dictatorship with a monarchy, meaning a king or a queen. You can't really have a dictatorship in America because our constitution in our country kind of goes about that differently. All right. But in our country, you know, there's voting, there's choice, there's many different people in our government that make decisions based on different situations. In a dictatorship, that's not how it works. You'll also see the word called totalitarianism. It's a very crazy word, but you should notice the word total in it. And a dictator has total control over their country. So it's a government run by a single person who has absolute authority over their country. Now, it's kind of hit or miss, to be honest. If it's a very good leader, okay, if it's a very good leader and they're a great person, so to speak, then that's great. You know, maybe they make every correct decision. But realistically, a lot of dictators are generally very powerful and kind of ruthless people. That's just what history has kind of proved. Okay, so now that we know a dictatorship, we should know that we're going to go into the word fascism. Okay, fascism and dictatorship are often kind of mixed together, but there is a little bit of a difference. So fascism, or a fascist government, is run by a dictator where that person controls all of the business and labor. So the government basically controls everything. They have full control. Okay, if there is someone needs a job, if someone needs something, they have to go through the government. Okay, if someone needs food, they have to go through the government. The government controls everything. Where in our country, technically speaking, we have the government does control things, but it has to get approval from its people. If the people are unhappy, they get rid of their leaders and they get rid of the situation, and it doesn't happen. In a fascist government, that's not how it works. The government makes decisions for everyone. So republic, democracies, there's a lot more freedom. Fascism and dictatorship, there's a lot more, what we say, control. Okay, so the government run by a dictator where that person controls all of the business and labor. Okay, any opposition of the dictator is not allowed. Does anyone want to take a guess? What are some things that can happen to a person in a fascist country if they disagree with the dictator, if they don't like the dictator? What happens to them?
They could be killed.
Okay, that's the very extreme, but that is true. They could be killed. What is another thing that could be happened that's maybe not as bad? They can go to jail. Okay, so those are usually two things. Now, if you were unhappy with a politician in our country, if you're unhappy with President Joe Biden or you are unhappy with President Trump, you could voice your displeasure. You're not going to get thrown in jail for that. Okay, you can't threaten the president. You can't say things like that. But if you're unhappy with something and you can voice your displeasure, nothing ever is going to happen to you. That's freedom of speech. In a fascist country, that's not how it works. Okay, you can't speak out against the government. In our country, like if you go to Twitter, if you go to social media and you follow some of the political news, like so many people are disagreements about things that are going on. You have the power to do that in a republic like our country. Okay. All right. So in fascism, okay, you have you have no free say basically. Okay. So we're looking at fascism for the most part and democracies for the most part. And what you're going to notice is the war is fought basically between countries that are democratic versus countries that are fascist. So the biggest fascist countries at the time are Germany, okay, and Italy. We will look at their leaders soon. Okay, but Germany and Italy had the very big fascist dictators that ran through this. Okay, so knowing fascism by the end of today is really important. I'm just looking at something quick. In 1 second here. I want to see if I can just post something. Are you asking, Liart, what Spain's government was at the time? Or are you just asking, like, what are you asking? Were they in the war? Well, I'm going to assume you're asking what Spain's government was. They are known as an autocracy, which is kind of like a dictatorship at the time, not quite as strong, but basically they're run by one person who has a pretty big power. So autocracy, dictatorship, they're all kind of the same thing as far as you need to be concerned. I'm just trying to look at, see if I have a picture here. No, I don't. Okay, that's fine. Let's just move on to communism. So communism and fascism is going to be a little weird. Communism and fascism are very similar. Okay, they're very similar, but many communists and fascists hated each other, especially in countries like Germany and Italy. Even though they were very similar, they couldn't stand each other. All right, and I think it's kind of because they were kind of competing for the same thing, a lot of government control. So you're going to see some communist countries start to come about. We've already looked at the definition of communism in the 1920s, but I want to compare it to fascism. So it's an economic system where all industry, trade, and property is owned by the government and is divided amongst its people based on need. All right, so the more you need, okay, the more the government's going to provide for you. All right, it's a very basic definition of it. All right, fascism and communism are kind of similar in terms of they want a lot of government control, but they can't stand each other. In a communist country, you can have a dictator running the communist country as well, which in this case, the country we're going to look at, the Soviet Union, that would be the case. They would have a guy by the name of Joseph Stalin running their country. All right. So when we did World War I, we looked at all the causes of World War I. We saw the mania, right? The militarism, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. World War II is a little different. World War II is a war based on what's called ideologies. It's a difference on how countries should be run, and those differences led to a major world war, okay, one that was even way worse than World War I. All right, so this is the first time you're getting familiar with some of these words like fascism and democracy. So understand fascism and communism, a lot more government control. A democracy or republic's a lot more freedom. And these two political systems are kind of gonna go at each other a little bit. All right, we don't need to worry about this. This is all region stuff. All right, we have one more major slide of notes. This is going to take some time. We're first going to start, how does a country become fascist? How does a country basically choose to give up all their freedoms in trust for full government control and a dictatorship? Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute to copy down what's in red. So please copy this down. All right, so how does a country become fascist? And that's kind of what we want to look at here. So number one, usually why a country becomes a fascist country, and they basically choose to put all of their faith into a fascist country, is they want to have a situation, they have a situation where the people are extremely unhappy or extremely poor, and oftentimes a little bit of both. So let's go through the classic example. Let's go through Germany. Okay, let's talk about Germany, just going back a little bit. If you remember in World War I, Germany was focused around losing World War I, and they had the Treaty of Versailles. What did Germany have to do with the treaty after the Treaty of Versailles? What happened to them? You can give me some specifics, or you could just tell me overall. What happened to Germany after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles?
They have to pay for the debts for the damage they did in war.
Good.
They have to give all the weapons away.
Good. They lost their military. Okay, so they basically became a very weak country. All right, and the people of that country, along with their government, became very poor and unhappy as well. There was no pride in Germany because they lost everything basically. So this is what happens. The German country, which is known as the Weimar Republic, okay, it's spelled like this. Okay, they are trying to get out of debt. They're trying to get their country back, but they can't. All right. And the people of this democratic republic country in Germany have had enough. Okay. So now, long story short, when a dictator comes in and says, it's not your fault that we're poor, it's someone else's fault. And if you elect me and I become your leader, I could fix everything. People start to follow along. And that's kind of what happens here because everyone's very unhappy. You know, I often say, this is a weird example. People don't start usually doing bad things, okay, if life is good. You know, people don't start doing drugs. People don't start committing crimes if life is going good and life is going well. If life is going well, you don't turn to those things. If things are not going so well, that's where the risk starts to come in because people then start doing things they're not supposed to be doing because they fall in with the wrong crowd, basically. And that's kind of what happens to Germany. They're so weak, they're so poor at this time. They're willing to listen to someone who's a little bit extreme, but promises that they can get them better. Okay? Number two, people of country believe that capitalism, democracy, and freedom is not what's best for the country. They believe that more government control is going to lead to less problems. Right? It's like a teacher who's a lot more strict in class. Okay, sometimes the classroom runs better a little bit. Too much freedom in class could mean the classroom gets a little out of control. All right, fascism is kind of the opposite. All right. Number three, the government promises that with their power, they will make the people's lives better. Okay, they believe more government means that they can work and make the people's lives better, and people will obviously in a fascist country believe that. Okay, now here's the truth. Now, if you know what I'm alluding to here, Germany is a fascist country. Germany will eventually lead to Adolf Hitler. Okay, and here's the truth. Adolf Hitler promised that he can make everything better in Germany. And here's the truth. He did. As bad of a guy Hitler was, and he was, things under Adolf Hitler got way better in Germany. Germany went from very weak to very strong in just a couple of years. So he was correct. Now, that's not making an excuse. He's a horrible, horrible leader in world history, but people followed him, and he was successful. All right, and when you start to see someone make your life a little bit better, even if they're not the best person, some people follow along with that, and that's what happens. All right, what makes a country fascist? Okay, please copy this down as well in blue. I believe this one. Let me check one more thing. Yes, this is the last thing for today. Okay. Yeah, let's write this down in blue, and then we'll see. Okay, what makes a country fascist? So usually, You have a one-party dictatorship, meaning there's only one political party, and there's the leader of that party that's going to make all the decisions. Now, there are some cases where fascist countries are run by like the military, but for the most part, they're run by a one-person show. All right. In this fascist country, if you were to go in there, it's the belief that government knows what's best for their country, and that dictator makes all the major decisions for the people. Okay. I want to add something here, if that's okay, guys. I think it's important. So add this to the notes here. People cannot visibly disagree. What I mean is that if they disagree with the public is doing, what the government is doing, you better keep it private. Because if you don't keep it private, you're going to get thrown in jail or you're going to get killed. You can't go out in the streets and protest like you do in the United States if you disagree with something the government does. Okay? Their whole government, fascist governments, are all about control. Right? If people are going against the government, then they're lacking control, so they have to go against that. Fascist governments also have a very strong military. That's a huge component of a fascist government, because their government needs to have, the way you keep control is by the military. Okay, if you disagree with the government and they don't penalize you and they don't threaten you, you're going to keep penalizing you're going to keep protesting against the government. All right, so they have a very strong military, and they want to disarm the citizens. Meaning, so in our country, it's a controversial, very controversial amendment, the Second Amendment, where people have the right to legally own a weapon. This is a lot of reasons having to do with American history, having a lot to do with looking at other countries around the world. Fascist countries take away their people's weapons, usually. No citizens have the right to own guns or weapons. And people are worried that if they take away your guns and weapons, that you would then not have the opportunity to protect yourself against the government if they come try and hurt you or your family. It's a controversial thing, but that is a Second Amendment right that people have in our country, the right to own a weapon legally. And this is one of the reasons in favor why people do want to have the Second Amendment. Okay.
Give me 2 seconds.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. All right. This is just the introduction to World War II. So tomorrow, right before break, you guys are going to get a reading on World War II. We're going to look at the sides and leaders. We're going to learn all of the major people. We're going to learn all the major sides and get a better sense of how this war kind of goes about, okay? When you get back from break is really where we start to pick up all of the major parts of World War II. These 2 days are just an introduction, just to get you more familiar. You need to know what fascism is. You need to know what a democracy is to really understand what World War II is. When you learn about D-Day, when you learn about the Holocaust, you need to understand how people thought at this time to better understand World War II. Okay? So, with that being said, today's a very straightforward lesson, as you can tell. All right? All you need to do is, if you look at it, I'm going to it here. That's not your class, sorry. If you look at it here, okay? Just read this along with me. Today's very simple. Watch the video, live meet, which you guys just did. Take your notes down on paper or Google Doc. Then take a photo of your notes and share the Google Doc. That is all you need to do for today. There's no reading. There's no assignment. This is just an introduction lesson, and I want to make sure that you guys have good notes written down. So right now, take a photo of your notes, post the Google Doc, whatever you want to do, just post it and turn it in, and that's it. You guys are done for the day. That's all I need for today's class. You guys can go a little bit early if you want, and you guys can obviously take a little break if you need. If you have any questions, then just hang back, but that is all you need to do for today.
Okay, then bye.
All right, bye. Have a great day.
See you guys.